So we finished with this little model. This is made out of basswood. You go to an ordinary model store. Am I feeding back? I am. Go to an ordinary model store. I have a slight sort of hobby that involves model making. I like model trains, and I make scenery and kind of stuff like that. Anyway, model stores. If you can't find the model suppliers, well, you'll find them online. But this is a very good wood to make. It's bass. Go to a model store, buy yourself a really sharp knife, scalpels, I mean surgically sharp, and you'll make very fine cuts. You just need a mitre. You can print up a stencil. You can make it on your CAD machine. You can make all the sides. It's all two-dimensional originally. You make the sides and then print it, and there's your template. And then you cut on the piece of paper. And you can even cut in your angles for the cut lines. Because you're not going to, the paper gets destroyed, of course. And once you've got them all pinned out with little thumbtacks, then you can tap it with glue, and then you assemble all the two-dimensional sides, and there you have it. That took me about, I suppose, about an hour and a half to make. I made 4 of them at the same time. All right, more models. Where are we? Press this button. Yes. Okay, 1986, Journey. Wow, that was a band. Kind of really funny people too. They were extraordinary. This is Raised on Radio, which turned out to be their biggest album ever. And it was also the last time Steve Perry really worked with them. And I make a big point there. Steve Perry was very, very important to that band. He was interested in nothing, actually. He was interested in no production. He just liked everything. You could show him anything and he'd like it. He was just interested in him and his voice and keeping out of the way of the others. That was a strange situation. Jonathan Cain was very interested in staging, and Neil Sean was just interested in being Neil Sean on the guitar. They were, I think socially, I'd say they were dysfunctional. Anyway, the point of this was I had this idea. They wanted something, a very clean stage. That's all they wanted. That was the only brief we got. And this is the stage. It's made out of styrofoam, foam core actually. Where's my little pointer? The other little details is this little hole and this little hole actually had stairs in. They were the entrance and exit for their technicians who never got up on stage. Drums were there. In this particular band, the bass player was Randy Jackson, of the Jacksons, of, what's the program he's on nowadays? Thank you. It's that very same Randy Jackson. And he was only allowed to be up here. He was never allowed down here. Anyway. So again, here we are, the triangles, they're gimbals. I've already bought the space by putting up triangles. The squares represent vari-lights, or moving lights. In those days, there were only vari-lights. And because, as I said, I've bought the space, because I've got these triangles up there, this is a stretch screen, a triangle of white fabric. These are great big slabs of what they called in the bad old days rapid deployment units. They were big, they were heavy, they were just slabs of lights. They had wheels on the bottom. They're actually here, there's a truss on the top, preloaded truss. I think that's about 30 feet. And then there are these 3 modules of rapid deployment modules. And these were all aircraft landing lights, and these were just PARs. And they were huge slabs. They were hung on a point at the top, 2 points on the top, and that's actually where the weight was bed. And then at the bottom, there was another pickup point so I could actually kick it into an angle. All of this moved, except for the very front truss. The front truss was an important point. It was about television lighting. Journey were one of the very first companies, bands, to actually have video reinforcement. And it was image magnification. They didn't have any content. It was all them. And that group of people became Nocturne. And Nocturne became a video company, which I still think exists. Somebody bought it anyway. And all those people still in the video business. So they were an in-house production. They owned their own lighting. They owned their own video. They owned their PA. They were kind of a family. It was a very San Francisco organization. They were very nice people, actually. Crazy as loons. But the point of the model was to show them that this would be the clear stage. I kind of borrowed from ocean liners. I'm a great borrower. of other people's styles, because I have no style myself. So the handrails were stainless steel. They were quite expensive, but they shone beautifully. If I'd done it again, I'd just use aluminum and then lacquer it and polish it and lacquer it. But in those days, stainless steel sounded really cool. So that was how it was, real simple. And the model was to demonstrate the gimbaling. This was in 1986. This was the number 2 Schornborg motor controller. The first one, number 1, was their beta model. So in effect, I had the first controller. And it used to operate by counting how long it took the motor to go up and how long it came down. So you could set it in a position, store it in a memory, press the go button, all the trusses would move to those new positions. Here's the funny story. It did it on time. Now, motors go up slowly because there's weight, and they come down quickly. So I've got this routine of them doing this wonderful gimbal, but actually they're doing this. so when they got about 8 foot, and there are a lot of aircraft landing, a lot of these, no, it wasn't the aircraft landers. These lights are getting rather close. And at that point, Steve Perry says, "Are they getting a little closer?" And I said, "Yeah, it's all part of the plan." On the phone, these things aren't working really well. So anyway, they changed that shortly after that to counting links, and that's how motor control is done now. If somebody in the way in the past had actually said, "Hey, let's use winches," we all use winches nowadays, but somebody came up with the idea of using industrial chain motors and turning the mechanism upside down, and that's what we live with, because some one person used chains, and everyone, "Oh, what a great idea." Instead of saying, "Hey, it could be better if we use winches, you have speed control of the winch." Anyway, that's the story that goes with that. So the point of these pictures is I never showed them the model. You must understand your client. Taylor Swift, Doddle, showed her a whole model, which we'll see later. It was because she was 17. She was only a few years away from her doll's house. So she saw and worked and imagined things in miniature. I just didn't feel comfortable about Journey actually having it, that's small. It would have been wrong. So I only showed them photographs. Everybody has the skill to scale in a photograph. So if you're not comfortable about the skills, the visual skills of your potential client, show them photographs. Plus this is taken with an 18mm lens, so it's actually unforced the picture. So you can do, and now we got Photoshop and everything else, so you can really trick it out. But try and keep honest, because that's going to come back and bite you. If you promise something that's a little too, looks great and you think it's great and then you can't quite deliver, no, you always keep yourself on course. So this really just demonstrates how these things would zoom around and the screens, and we didn't project on the screens, it was all gobo patterns and so on. I just showed it around like that. This is actually a very small model. This is quarter inch to the foot. Usually I work in ½ inch, and the reason for that is it's a lot easier. Your cuts look smaller, and all the joins, and it's just so fiddly, ½ inch. But this is quite a big model, so I made it. So there it is. Steve Perry, Randy Jackson, Jonathan Kane, and Neil Sean. And I can't remember the drummer's name, which is a shame, because he was a sessions man. He'd been hired. It took 3 months. They had 100 auditions for one drummer, and this was the guy they saw number 3. So anyway, he was there, and he had his girlfriend on the road, and he was slightly balding. All right, he was balding. And his girlfriend was complaining. He was wearing this hat, because he's balding. He's wearing this hat, and she was always complaining, "I can never see his face." And she was quite vocal. So anyway, there was a moment of truth, and it came out while we're all sitting down eating. The band's there, the manager's there, and he said, "You're going to have to do something about me being able to, not being able to see my face." And I said, "Well, you could take your hat off." "No, I'm not doing that." "Well, we could cut the brim out and put a little plastic visor in there so light can come through." "No, I don't want that." I said, "Well, you could always wear, a couple of rabbits on your head." Oh, that got their attention. I said, "Yeah, because, from a distance, rabbits look like hares." The girlfriend, she freaked. Anyway, she wasn't at the band, all laughed. I mean, I really got a round of applause almost. Anyway, the next day she was gone. I had no problems with the drummer evermore, but it was a real risky moment. But I didn't really mind, because he wasn't the band, he was the sessions guy. He was just like me, a hired hand. but it was funny. So anyway, there's the point of models is to demonstrate you don't have to show the model. That worked really well, actually. That was up here, there was a big video screen on the sides. There were video screens. The projectors are so pathetic, they had to put cones of material between the projector and the back of the screen to keep any ambient light out from the back of the screen. 1986, things, they were ahead of their time, let's say that. Okay, I think I'm coming to the end of the models here. This is George Michael. I did everything Wham ever did. Remember them? They were cool, actually. And then after George became himself with the Faith album, and the question, so what do you want, George? Dumb question. You should really try and avoid those questions. So I want to express my freedom, which is actually rather a good answer. I'd rather have a poetic answer than I want a general notion kind of answer. I want to express my freedom. Oh, well, I didn't want to ask what freedom. I just assumed we weren't going to talk about he was out of Wham at last and he's going to be George Michael. So the answer to that was, oh, well, to express your freedom, first we have to put you in a cage. And this is the model of that cage. It was really quite a structure. It was all aluminum frame. It was really simple. It's stacked and packed real simple because it's a just 2-inch square tube. And the front hinged up on a hydraulic system of, basically, there's a hydraulic driven winch which pulled up cables that opened the whole front up. And then later, the sides would gull wing like this. Now the lights are, well, not shown in this model, but we actually had moving lights in a line that way. So we ended up with a pair in the middle. A really nice pair, 2-position. I used a pair because a single light in the center, this is really good information, is a real liability, especially the rear light. Let's finish with a single light on a silhouette. Seen it often enough. It's a really great finishing look until the light behind you fails. It's a moving light. Now all your moving lights do these fabulous patterns all the way through the show, except this single one middle light just tilts up and down because it doesn't join in any kind of symmetry except for that tilt up and down. It can't do a left and a right because it immediately becomes asymmetrical. 2 problems. It's not really being utilized properly in the general mesh of all the lights. And what if it fails? Solution, put another light behind it. And now you've got 2 lights, and you've got 2 lights doing one light's job, and it looks like one light for that fabulous silhouette scene. But if the first light fails, you've always got a second. And then when you move all the lights into new positions, you've got 2 lights that can do the symmetrical thing. That actually took me a long time to figure that one out.
Do you double hang your back center light as well?
Actually, if I have key lights and important lights, I double everything. I like now, well, we'll come to that, the television lighting thing. I always, if I have one person, they get 2 lights from the same place, right next door to each other.
You keep both lights on the same address? Do you keep both lights on address?
Yeah, same dress, same number, same handle.
Each other?
Yeah, they treat them as one light. Singletons are real, they're failed. They're bound to go out. It's not a matter of if, it's always a when. And the when is just when you wanted it. Always. So that's the advice about single lights. Don't use them, especially centers. It is a great look. I love it. But 2, and to disguise the fact that there are 2 lights side by side, or 2 lights side by side, but put one right behind the other, upstage, downstage. That's how you'll get a single light with redundancy built in. So then if this gull winged up, I'm going to cough again. I need a switch. Excuse me. And then the back sides barn doored open, and these were just on hinges, and the mechanism was a piece of trick line and a guy, and he pulled it. And trick line's tie line, it's black. It's called trick line because illusionists use it to move their bits and pieces around. You never see it. It absorbs light well. And that was it. This held up the whole lighting rig. These eventually became a sort of a zigzag pattern, but they came down lower. These lights were also a diagonal on the barn doors. So these were the barn doors, these were gull wings, and then there's the big front cage. The only thing that didn't pass muster was the checkered floor, which I'm really glad, and eventually that went. Here we have the ego ramps, They can get all the way up to the side of the arenas. They're actually quite easy to build. Again, there'd be a tunnel through here for the exit. These are just little architectural models from Plast Strut Inc. Plastrut. They make model material, plastic, brass. You've all seen those lovely architectural models. People are going to build the shopping center and they show you a nice little model. That's all the material comes from that company. He's writing it down. He wants to know everything about materials. Sourcing stuff is actually quite easy now on the internet, but still it's nice to know. So that was how it opened, and then this is the beginning. George is down center. We've got a whole bunch of lights on him. The cage is closed. This appears. We actually had a conceal. There was a kabuki that pulled. No, it was an Austrian, I remember. It draped up, and it had the word faith in it, which is an applique, so light could come back from, and we could light backlight the word. The cage opened first, and after it had opened, there's a duplicate cage, but these are little moving mirrors all the way down the sides, which eventually would be out when the gull wings open. And they're moving mirrors, and it's actually simulating laser. It was a little 2-inch beam. This is made by, I can't remember. They're out of business now anyway. They were a laser company. But that was really complicated. We had a catwalk up here where technicians actually lived through the whole show. They were really prototypical, and they needed a lot of attention. And this is the only time they really got used properly. And what we had done is actually placed them in such a way that they replicated the entire front cage grid. So this opened up, and then this, on moving mirrors, opened up again. So it was like a double opening. It was a big gag. It was a really expensive thing to do. And I wouldn't do it again. I'd spend the money on something else. Never lit the band. It was all about George. The band are backlit. This is a black RP screen. This in particular one's made by Roscoe. Black RP is really good. Rear projection screens, if you don't like them, they tend to glow and you have no control over them. Black rear projection screen is kind of unique because when you don't light it, it turns to nothing. It's black. The negative would be it has a off center, it drops off, the light content drops off very quickly. But if you're just using it for kind of a colored cyc, it works well because it's not a single source from a projector in the middle, it's actually a lot of lights across the back. So the band were never lit. Saved a fortune in lighting, actually, not lighting the band. But they were lit because they were in a lot of light, but they were never lit specifically. He's coincidentally lit, so's the drums. But this person here, they were just objects. They weren't people. It was all about George. And here it is opened up. And this is all laser stuff. This was I Want Your Sex. He thought he was going to grow up. But the first night, everybody realized the front row was still 15 years old. So this became, the crew motto became, I want your pocket money. And that was... Yeah, there was the funny story about that is we actually, Benji Lefebvre and I, one day had that printed up as a T-shirt and we gave it to everybody and everybody's wearing it. And the management come all the way up to us and say, so where's our T-shirts? What do you mean, your T-shirt? Come on, we know you're doing it. How did you work that out? Because you're the only two not wearing a T-shirt. So anyway, we had all these T-shirts, I want your pocket money. It was kind of funny. Yeah, again, here's the example of the band not being lit. Dion Estes, he's a real great bass guitarist. But they were interesting because they were mysterious. And by not showing their personality or their face or just constantly showing them with some kind of light behind, they became really good. They were really mysterious. This is 60 Mark II C Vari-Lights doing what everybody does all the time now. I never used to do this. This is a one-time moment. It was like the big ta-da.
Still pretty.
It's still pretty? Thank you. We can go back to that. There's a rear follow spot right there. That is actually a follow spot, and I had 6 across the back.
What year was that?
Whoa, this is, let's see.
1980.
Yeah, 88? No, that was something else. It was about 80, middle,
1987?
thank you. No, I was doing something else then. It was earlier. It was about 84, 85. Mid-80s, let's say there. It seems like only yesterday. Now this is Wham, and Wham was an interesting, really interesting. They had a brilliant manager, and he was a really creative manager. He really knew how to manipulate. Wham was a little band that suddenly came out of nowhere. They were suddenly a big ticket, and they only played a few little clubs in England. And they were such a hot thing. And everybody in America was wanting them. And he said, okay, we're going to go and do 9 little clubs, including the Palladium here in Los Angeles. The promoters were, oh, we could do multiple dates in big theaters. No. So we did 9 dates, and then about 6 months later we came back. We can do multiple dates in big theaters. No, we're going to do stadiums. We're going to do 6 of them. This is Philadelphia, and this is what we did. And this is really simple. All it is gauze. The hard, excuse me, this damn microphone is really loud. Okay, the hardest part was building the scaffolding, which you would have to build to put all the PA up. What we did was just actually extend it a little bit with some angles. And then this is ordinary shark's tooth gauze, grey. Grey's a little bit more controllable than white. It still works like white, but the material stops being the material. It's about ownership in a way. And this is the daylight. And behind there we had some big hurricane machines, which we got from somebody in the film industry here. And they're basically 6-foot propellers on Volkswagen air-cooled engines in a big cage on a trailer. And we parked those up and put down the outriggers, which are very long, because this thing wants to fly off. And we had one on either side to billow these sails forwards. No matter what the weather was doing to them, we overpowered it. And then down in the bottom are just ordinary strips, 4-cell sight lights, and then there's some up here. You can actually see them on the roof of the stage. And then again, and here it is, all lit up at night. And you can see how it's billowing. Oh, looks like it's on automatic. This is Hollywood Park, the old racetrack. This is a scan of a really tatty photograph. Anyway, and that cost next to nothing, really, in relevant scale. The Hollywood Park was 130,000 people. I mean, you got the budget there, but we spent hardly anything. It was all rental equipment. Bob C. out of New York, who has the biggest and heaviest equipment ever, he provided all the conventional lighting, which was primarily just theatrical sight lights. So, that shows you models, that shows you how to sell your product. Selling yourself is actually what you're doing. Because if you don't sell yourself, they won't have faith in you, and they won't think you can do it, and then they'll go somewhere else. Oh, actually, before I answer your question, somebody raised a real good point. Remember I was telling you when that industrial digital print, and then we were talking about, digital print versus projection. The thing one of the reasons why I favored to just do it as a print and not use projection was projection is one thing, content is another. There's a big expense. And I didn't, at that point, I think at the time I was much more theatrically inclined, and I'd rather manipulate one scene multiple times than have projection that's kind of can eat up your money. And it's not the projector that's expensive, it's the content, the compilation, buying license for stock footage, and just a lot of time. If you can do it yourself, it's going to take you months. Otherwise, you're going to hire somebody, and they're going to be expensive. Video is an expensive item simply because of the content, unless you're using image magnification. Who actually put that to me? Oh, yeah, you are. Good point, actually. Thank you.
I think a lot of times, too, you're also at the mercy of the day, of the light, if you're doing it outside.
Oh, yeah. Well, outside,
Yeah,
I wouldn't even go. Video, unless you're using video tiles, projection outdoors is a nightmare, a real nightmare. There's so many things against you. And what can I say?
I have a question for you. So you keep on talking about sales, and obviously it's important to sell your ideas and sell yourself. Who are you selling to, or who's your point of contact on a tour, or how are you getting in?
Oh.
Who are you talking to? Who are you?
Well, once upon a time, I started in this business when there was no business. It was a cottage industry, if that. It was, 19-year-old kids doing like psychedelic light shows. And then somebody said, hey, I need a lighting. And I was very lucky because I was without competition. But eventually you'll find you just have to work your way up in a way. Look up managers. Cold calls are hard to make, but you do make them. I'd like to be included in on this, and sometimes they'll give you the opening. Yeah, come on down and show us what you got. They might as well. It's a real good long shot for a manager. Choose young managers, young bands, young artists. Just go and show them what you've got. Find out what they're about. Research them. Look at their other images, even just their album covers. See how they like to present themselves. Try and stimulate your own imagination. And just get in front of them. And you have to figure out the politics yourself. The manager is the guy who will make the connections. A production manager is a good ally to get you in the door, but he's got to believe that you're going to do it his way. That's a tricky course to go. Because production managers end up having to manage it all, and they want to find somebody who's going to do something that is manageable. Unfortunately, that side is they then want to manipulate you to do what they think's right. And now you're stuck between what the artist wants. Who's the most powerful person in that whole process? It's usually the artist. They might defer and let other people speak on their behalf, but the person who has the actual veto is the artist. They're the one. They really are. So, yeah, approach the person who's nearest to the money. That's a good advice, because they're the people who will, it's a shortcut. If you start talking to the production manager, he's going to start talking to the manager's going to start talking to the next person, and eventually it gets kind of diffused. If you can get talking to the artist straight away. I know people who just go to concerts and stand in line and meet at the meet and greet. There's no rule or regulation to how you can do it. But you have a short moment where you can get through that revolving door, and it either spits you out or you actually are in the room, and now what do? Hey, I've got this, and you have to go straight into and I rehearse my spiel. I really do. With models especially. Models that you're going to manipulate. You have to pretend you're the puppet master. You have to be entertaining. Here's a piece of advice. Entertainers are real suckers for entertainment. So if you can entertain them with your ideas, you're on the right road. But if it's a yawn, more technical drawings, they're not there. Their ego, they're not imagining what you're telling them. They're trying to feel it around them, and how is that going to work? Work out how the band has to be laid out. Don't design a nice big structure but the keyboard player can't see the bass player because they need for one song a moment to see each other. It's all sorts of connections. You've got to do your research. I don't even know how to answer that question. Good luck.